Sometimes, the most powerful music isn't played with perfect technique. It's played when someone finally sits beside you and shares the bench. Today's story begins with a boy who could only play with one hand, and a girl who sat down quietly beside him, filling in the rest, note by note, until a duet was born. It ends with an audience too moved to interrupt. If you believe music isn't just about hitting the right keys, but about sharing them, hit like. Tap subscribe. Stay with us. Because today, a teenage piano student will do something no expert ever managed to do. Help a quiet, disabled child dare to play with someone else. Michael Carrington was not the kind of man who believed in miracles. As the founder of a billion-dollar biotech company, he built his fortune on formulas, facts, and failures turned into functional systems. But when it came to his son Noah, no amount of logic could help him navigate the unknown. Seattle was grayer than usual that Tuesday morning as he stood outside the modest brick building of the Westlake Community Music Center. It wasn't the kind of place you'd expect a Carrington to frequent. No private instructors, no glossy flyers, no promises of excellence through competition. It smelled faintly of varnished wood and rain-soaked coats. The sign above the entrance was crooked, but the woman at the front desk greeted him with a smile that felt disarmingly human. "This is just a trial session," he reminded himself quietly, as he adjusted Noah's jacket. The boy flinched a little at the sudden tug. Michael immediately let go. Noah was 9 years old, though most people mistook him for younger. He was small for his age, slender, with sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of morning frost, beautiful, but hard to reach. Cerebral palsy had affected his fine motor skills, especially in his right hand. He could move it, but it didn't always listen. What looked like hesitation to the untrained was often Noah trying his best. And lately, trying had been hard. He didn't speak much, especially not with strangers. And when he did, it came out soft, uncertain, like a question he was never sure he had the right to ask. Loud noises made him shut down. Sudden changes could send him into long, silent retreats. His previous school had tried, Michael had tried, therapists had tried. But nothing stuck. This music center had been recommended by Dr. Ellis, Noah's occupational therapist, who insisted that music could build bridges between parts of the brain nothing else could reach. Michael had his doubts, but when you're the father of a child who cries at playgrounds and flinches at birthday parties, you don't argue with hope. The music room was small, 2 upright pianos, a few stools, some well-worn sheet music taped to the walls. A handful of kids were already there, scattered across different corners, plucking at instruments or just watching. It was a mixed age group. Nothing formal. That was part of the philosophy, he had been told. Let children approach music on their own terms. Noah didn't look around much. He kept his eyes on the floor and his fingers curled against his jacket sleeve, as if bracing for something. Michael knelt down beside him. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he said gently. "We're just going to listen." "Okay." Noah gave a faint nod, more instinct than agreement. One of the instructors, a soft-spoken man in his late 30s, guided them to a corner where a keyboard had been set up. "He can just explore," he said. "No pressure." Michael sat on a folding chair nearby, keeping just enough distance. He watched as Noah hesitated, then slowly reached out with his left hand to press a single key. The sound was quiet, almost ghostly. A D note. Noah pressed it again. Then an F. Then stopped. Michael noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his right hand hovered like a bird unsure of landing. He wanted to help, wanted to say, "It's okay," or "Try this," or "You're doing great," but something in him stopped. Instead, he just sat and watched. Other children played. Some banged on drums without rhythm. One girl was humming to herself while writing on a notepad. Another boy was trying to figure out how to use a tambourine. There was no judgment. Just noise, curiosity, patience. Still, Michael wasn't sure what he was hoping for. Maybe just a moment, any moment, where Noah didn't look so alone. And yet, even then, he knew he was asking too much. For all his resources, Michael Carrington had come to this humble room not to look for a prodigy or progress chart. He just didn't want his son to get hurt again. Emotionally, psychologically, whatever the term, it was all the same. Each time Noah tried something and failed, each time a teacher looked confused, or a classmate pulled away, it left another quiet bruise. Michael had spent years trying to protect him from that. He wasn't here today to see Noah succeed. He was here to keep him from breaking. As the session went on, Noah occasionally pressed a key. Sometimes two. Once, both hands moved, but not together. The right hand jittered and then dropped back to his lap. Michael saw it, and his heart clenched. But then something unexpected happened. When it was time to pack up, Noah didn't run toward the door. He stayed seated, looking down at the keys. His lips were slightly parted, as if he'd left something unsaid. Michael stood, unsure of what to make of it. But in that stillness, that moment of pause, he felt something shift, something small, like the first note of a song he hadn't known they were writing. Lily Thompson wasn't the type to interrupt. She'd been coming to the Westlake Community Music Center 3 afternoons a week for nearly a year now, usually sliding into the side room where the second piano sat, away from the chatter and off-key recorders. She liked that it was quiet, tucked away from the main area where teachers corrected posture and children stumbled through scales. Here, she could play freely. No one asked her to perform. No one timed her. She had learned to play when she was 5, her mother placing her small fingers on a weathered upright and whispering, "Let the keys do the talking." At 16, Lily didn't just play music, she spoke through it. It was her native language, especially on days when words failed. She had noticed the boy before. Small. Quiet. Eyes like glassy water before a storm. She didn't know his name, but he always sat at the same keyboard near the front of the room, pressing single notes with his left hand and pausing for long stretches, as if waiting for the right moment to move again. He never seemed frustrated, just focused in his own orbit. Most days, she didn't interfere. She respected the invisible line between someone else's space and her own. But on this particular afternoon, something in her shifted. She had been halfway through a Chopin etude when a familiar melody floated through the room in a hesitant rhythm, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It was broken, halting, played with one hand in uneven intervals. Lily glanced up from her sheet music. It was the boy. He sat alone, his right hand resting still on his lap, the left doing all the work, struggling to carry a melody that was clearly meant for 2 hands. But what caught her wasn't the imperfection. It was the persistence. The way he kept going, despite the lopsided sound, as if the music mattered more than the mechanics. She rose from her bench slowly. Her steps were quiet, careful not to startle him. She didn't say a word. She simply walked over to the piano next to his, glanced at the sheet music he had laid open, pages smudged with use, and then eased onto the bench beside him. There was just enough space on the left side of the keyboard. She slid into it. The boy glanced at her, just once. A flicker of surprise, but not fear. His hand paused above the keys. She lifted her own hands gently, fingers hovering over the lower register. Her part would be the bass line. Then she looked forward again, not at him, but at the music. And she played. Softly. Steadily. Just the accompaniment, nothing more. He waited for a beat, too, then resumed. Right hand, tentative melody. Left hand, warm, grounded harmony. Together, the duet found breath. They weren't in sync at first. She followed him. He adjusted to her. Some notes landed late. Others rushed ahead. But slowly, something locked in. Rhythm. Balance. A shared understanding built not through speech, but sound. Lily didn't look at him again. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just played. And he kept playing. There were moments when he hesitated, and she filled the silence with a drawn-out chord, giving him time to find his way back. There were moments when she stumbled, on purpose, just enough to let him lead. It wasn't about performance. It was about presence. By the time they reached the final measure, the room around them had quieted. Not because someone asked it to, but because something sacred was unfolding. They struck the last chord together, his finger trembling slightly on the final note. Then stillness. He didn't move. Neither did she. Then, as if by some unspoken cue, she stood. She walked back to her piano, resumed her seat, and returned to her etude as if nothing had happened. But her hands moved slower now. Softer. The boy remained at his keyboard, fingers resting lightly on the keys. His face was unreadable, but his shoulders were looser. He didn't flinch when the room grew noisy again. Michael Carrington, seated in the back, had witnessed the whole thing. But he said nothing. It wasn't his moment. It was theirs. Michael Carrington had learned to measure progress in inches, not miles. When it came to Noah, even eye contact could feel like a miracle. And on that rainy afternoon in the music room, Michael witnessed something that made him sit up straighter, breath catching mid-inhale, not because it was loud or grand, but because it was impossible. Noah had never let strangers near him. Not at the park. Not in therapy. Not even at family gatherings. If someone new came too close, Noah would turn away or freeze, folding into himself like a shuttered window. And if they touched the space he occupied, his chair, his toy, his quiet, he would push them away. Not with anger. Just self-preservation. As if the world had already taught him how much noise it could make, and he wanted none of it. But not today. Michael watched the girl approach. Not bold, not hesitant, just steady. She didn't speak. She didn't look at him for permission. She simply sat. A 16-year-old girl, who clearly knew her way around a piano, took her place on the left side of the bench next to his son as if she belonged there. And Noah, his Noah, didn't flinch. He turned his head slightly, just enough to register her presence. His eyes met hers for the briefest second. Then he looked down again. And resumed playing. Michael stared, barely blinking. The girl's hands moved across the bass notes gently, her timing cautious but confident. Noah, ever so subtly, adjusted the tempo of his right hand to match her. There was no instruction. No cue. Just two sets of fingers learning how to breathe together. And somehow, it worked. They weren't in sync. Not entirely. But that didn't matter. There was something else happening, something deeper than musical coordination. Michael could feel it in his chest, tight and unfamiliar. It wasn't about sound. It was about trust. Michael leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. He hadn't moved since they started playing. His phone buzzed in his jacket pocket, ignored. A part of him didn't want to exhale, afraid the smallest sound might disrupt whatever fragile thing was blooming just a few feet away. What struck him most wasn't that Noah was tolerating someone beside him. It was that Noah was responding to her. Adjusting. Listening. Engaging. Not with words, but with rhythm. With breath. With a willingness to let her be there, to take up space next to him without pushing her away. There had been so many moments over the years when Michael had wished for this. In speech therapy sessions where silence hung like fog. In classrooms where Noah sat alone at recess. In waiting rooms where children whispered and pointed. He had longed, not for breakthroughs, but for connection. For Noah to feel less alone, even for a moment. And now, here it was. Not because someone trained it into him. Not because of a structured social story or an incentive chart. But because a girl sat down, said nothing, and played her half of a broken melody. Michael's throat tightened. She didn't guide him. She didn't reach across the keyboard or offer to help. She didn't praise him or correct him. She just matched his pace, found his rhythm, and filled in the space where he couldn't reach. Noah didn't smile. He didn't need to. His posture said everything. He leaned ever so slightly in her direction, not touching, not crowding but including. His fingers pressed the keys with more intention, as if knowing someone was listening. As if, for the first time, he wasn't carrying the melody alone. Michael felt something loosen inside him. A knot he hadn't realized he'd been holding for years. He remembered nights spent researching the latest treatments. Days spent visiting specialists, each promising more than they could deliver. Conversations with other parents that left him more isolated than informed. And the quiet ache that never quite left. The ache of wondering if his son would ever find a way to be seen, not just evaluated. Today, Noah was seen. Not as a diagnosis. Not as a project. But as a partner. Michael didn't applaud when the piece ended. He couldn't. His hands stayed clasped, unmoving. He didn't want to break the silence that followed, the sacred kind that only happens after something truly meaningful. Noah remained at the keyboard, still as stone, his fingers lightly grazing the ivory. The girl returned to her own piano like nothing unusual had occurred. But everything had. The music faded, but neither of them moved right away. The rest of the room slowly returned to its usual buzz. Chairs scraping, instruments being put away, quiet laughter between students. A teacher clapped their hands once and called for the next group. But at the keyboard near the wall, Noah remained seated. Michael watched, expecting his son to hop off the bench like he always did, immediately retreating to the safety of his routine. That was how it had gone every other time. Noah would finish, then stand up without a word, eyes locked on the door, eager to leave before someone approached him. But today was different. Noah didn't move. He stayed on the bench, hands in his lap, gaze fixed on the girl beside him. Lily, Michael had learned her name from a clipboard at the front desk. She was calmly gathering her sheet music, smoothing each page with a practiced touch before sliding them into a worn leather folder. Noah didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The fact that he stayed was louder than any word could have been. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't confusion. It was waiting. And that was new. Michael felt his breath catch. He'd never seen his son wait for anyone like this, not without prompting, not without someone saying, "Hold on, buddy," or "Let's say goodbye." But Noah was doing it on his own. Choosing to stay beside someone just a little longer. Lily noticed, too. She looked over, surprised to still see him there. Her expression softened. She didn't offer a high five or try to fill the silence with awkward small talk. She just smiled, and tilted her head slightly. "You played the hard part," she said. Her voice was light, unforced, like she was stating a fact instead of giving a compliment. Noah blinked. Then, as if something warm flickered behind his eyes, he smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't flashy. Just a gentle upward pull at the corners of his mouth. The kind of smile that doesn't come from being proud, but from feeling understood. Michael sat back, stunned. He had seen his son smile before, of course. But this was different. This wasn't the automatic grin Noah sometimes gave when prompted for photos, or the anxious twitch when trying to please a teacher. This smile was earned, real, and directed at someone else. Lily didn't make a big deal out of it. She simply closed her music folder and stood. "See you around," she said, and turned to leave, as naturally as she had arrived. No praise. No praise fishing. Just an acknowledgement that something meaningful had happened, and it didn't need to be explained. Noah watched her go. Then slowly, he got up too. Michael was still frozen in his seat. He didn't trust himself to speak. He was afraid that if he opened his mouth, the emotion sitting in the back of his throat would spill out too fast. So he just stood and offered Noah a smile of his own as the boy walked over to him, calm and unhurried. Later in the car, Michael didn't ask questions right away. He let the radio hum low. The rain tapped gently against the windshield. And Noah, sitting in the back seat, stared out the window, unusually still. Eventually, Michael asked, "Did you like playing today?" Noah didn't answer with words. But he nodded. And that was enough. Because Michael wasn't thinking about scales or therapy goals or measurable outcomes. He wasn't wondering how many notes Noah had played or whether he'd follow through next week. He was thinking about one thing. Connection. His son had stayed behind, not because someone told him to, but because he wanted to. Because something in that moment had been worth lingering for. A girl had played the part Noah couldn't reach, and in doing so, helped him discover that music didn't have to be perfect, or even complete, to be shared. Michael whispered to himself, almost inaudibly, I've never seen him respond to anyone like that. It wasn't a statement of pride. It wasn't even one of astonishment. It was reverence. The kind of reverence you feel when witnessing something sacred, not loud, not miraculous, just profoundly human. The next morning, Michael Carrington found himself pacing a small corner of his office, phone in hand, hesitating over a number he'd scribbled on a sticky note. It wasn't the kind of call he usually made. In business, he was decisive, sharp, never second-guessing. But this felt different. After yesterday's quiet miracle at the music center, something had shifted in him. For the first time in years, he had seen Noah engage, not through coaching or coaxing, but through the gentle presence of a girl who played the bass line to his son's melody without saying a word. Michael couldn't let that go. So he made the call. Lily's mother answered, her voice kind, a little surprised. Oh sure, I remember you from the music center, she said warmly. Lily told me a little about yesterday. She wasn't sure anyone had noticed. Michael chuckled, his voice unusually soft. I noticed. And I'd love to speak with you both in person, if that's all right. I just wanted to say thank you. Later that afternoon, they met in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Michael chose the place carefully, somewhere calm, no background music, large windows with soft natural light. When they arrived, Lily looked the same as she had the day before, understated jeans, a slightly oversized hoodie, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Her mother, Rebecca, carried an air of quiet strength, measured, polite, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. Michael started with gratitude. I know yesterday might not have seemed like much to most people, he said, folding his hands. But I've been watching my son keep his distance from the world for years. And yesterday, he didn't run. He waited for someone. He smiled. That means more to me than I can explain. Lily looked down, slightly embarrassed. I didn't really do anything, she said. Michael shook his head. You did exactly what no one else could. You sat beside him, and didn't make him feel like a project. Rebecca smiled faintly at that. That sounds like Lily. Michael took a slow breath, choosing his words. I was wondering if you might be open to continuing what you started, with Noah. Maybe once a week. Same time. I'd be happy to provide compensation for your time. He expected hesitation. What he didn't expect was Lily's quiet but immediate response. I don't want to be paid, she said gently. Then, after a pause, she added, I just like the way he listens when we play. The room felt still for a moment. Michael studied her face, not out of scrutiny, but something closer to awe. There was no trace of performance in her voice, no hint of trying to impress. She meant it. Most people talked about Noah like he was a challenge, a problem to solve. Even the kindest of them often carried an edge of condescension or pity. But Lily saw something else. Not a broken child. Just a quiet boy who listened. Michael swallowed a swell of emotion. I can't tell you how much that means. Rebecca looked at her daughter with pride, but didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. This was Lily's space. Lily gave a small nod. If it's okay with him. I'd like to keep playing together. Michael smiled. It's more than okay. I think he'd like that very much. They didn't talk logistics for long, just agreed to keep things informal, consistent, and pressure-free. Michael insisted on covering travel costs at least, but Lily remained firm. "Let's just see how it goes," she said with a shrug. As they stood to leave, Michael extended his hand to Rebecca, then to Lily. "Thank you," he said again, quieter now. "Not just for what you did, but for how you did it." Lily gave a half smile. "He makes me slow down. Most of the time, I rush through everything. But when I play with him, I have to listen first." Michael nodded slowly. "That's more than most adults ever learn." They left the cafe with no fanfare, just a mutual understanding that something rare had begun. The second time Michael invited Lily and her mother to meet, it wasn't at a cafe, it was at his office. Not the high-rise one downtown with sweeping views and glass conference tables, but a smaller, quieter space tucked behind the Carrington Foundation's outreach wing. It had warm wood walls, a few framed photos of past community events, and a piano in the corner, an upright Yamaha, polished but clearly played. Michael greeted them with a firm handshake and a calm that felt more personal than professional. "Thanks for coming again," he said, gesturing toward the chairs arranged in a half-circle. "I wanted to talk to you about something a little bigger than just Noah." Lily raised an eyebrow slightly, curious. She'd come straight from school, backpack slung over one shoulder, her sneakers slightly scuffed, fingers absently fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. Rebecca sat beside her but stayed quiet. She sensed this wasn't her conversation to lead. Michael leaned forward. "For the past year, I've been working on a new initiative. It's called the Play Together Project, a community-based music therapy program for children with disabilities. The idea is simple: pair trained instructors and volunteers with kids who struggle to connect in traditional classrooms, and give them space to explore music together." He paused, letting the idea settle. "But here's the thing," he continued. "Programs like this don't succeed because of funding or fancy equipment. They succeed when someone the kids relate to, shows them it's okay to take the first step." Lily's brow furrowed slightly. "You mean like a mentor?" Michael nodded. "Exactly. Not a teacher. Not a therapist. Just someone who sits beside them. The way you did with Noah." He stood and walked over to the piano, laying a hand gently on its lid. "I've spoken to the music center staff. I've got teachers ready. I've got the backing. What I don't have is a face, a real story, that says this is what it looks like when we listen first and play second." He turned back toward her. "I want you to be that person, Lily." The room went still. Lily blinked. "Me?" Michael smiled. "You already are, in a way. But I'd like to make it official. Partner with us. Be part of designing what this looks like for teens like you, people who know how to speak music without words." Rebecca shifted slightly in her chair, glancing at her daughter with surprise, but not disbelief. Lily's voice was soft. "I'm not a professional. I'm not even old enough to drive by myself yet." Michael chuckled. "That's exactly why you're perfect. You're not intimidating. You're real. You didn't help Noah out of obligation. You did it because you wanted to. And he knew." Lily looked down, thinking. Her fingers twisted the drawstring of her hoodie, a quiet motion that betrayed the weight of her thoughts. "I don't know if I can, lead something." "You won't be alone," Michael said gently. "You'll work with our team, educators, music therapists, volunteers. But the story starts with you." He let a pause hang in the air. "You helped my son play the rest of a song. Now I'm asking you to help other kids dare to start one." The words landed softly, but firmly. Something in Lily's face shifted. A quiet sense of awe maybe. Or responsibility. She glanced at her mom, who gave a small nod, silent encouragement. Finally, Lily looked up at Michael. "Okay," she said. "I'll try." Michael's smile widened. "That's all I could ever ask." 2 months later, the old auditorium at the Westlake Community Center looked nothing like it usually did. The folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows. A banner stretched across the back of the stage, hand-painted by volunteers, read, "Play Together, a night of shared music." Strings of soft white lights framed the walls. In the corner, a bake sale table buzzed with parents and supporters. But at the heart of it all sat a single piano, polished to a gentle sheen, lit by a quiet spotlight. Michael stood in the wings, arms folded, watching as the room filled with people, neighbors, therapists, teachers, and families of children who had begun to participate in the new program. The energy was warm, expectant, and just a little nervous. He glanced at Noah, who was seated beside him, wearing a light blue button-down shirt and navy pants. His hair had been combed carefully to the side. He looked smaller than usual in the glow of the overhead lights, but focused, calm. Across from him, Lily stood smoothing the front of her dress, fingers twitching slightly as they often did when she was thinking too hard. She offered Noah a small smile. "You ready?" she whispered. Noah didn't say anything, but he nodded. That was enough. They walked onto the stage together. Noah climbed onto the bench first, scooting toward the right side of the keyboard. Lily joined him on the left. She placed her hand lightly on the lower register keys, giving him one last glance, waiting for his lead. No one introduced them. There was no announcer, no speech. Just the two of them. They began with a single note, Noah's right hand pressing the opening tone of "You Are My Sunshine." It was a little soft, slightly hesitant. But then Lily followed, her left hand layering in the harmony, smooth and steady. Together, they built the melody, one phrase at a time. The tempo wasn't perfect. At one point, Noah paused slightly too long between verses. Lily waited, then picked it up again, letting him find his place. When his fingers stumbled over a note, she adjusted the rhythm just enough to keep the thread unbroken. They played without looking at each other. But the music held them in place. Halfway through, a quiet rustle passed through the audience, someone wiping away a tear, another person leaning forward with their hand to their chest. No one moved. No one whispered. It wasn't that the duet was flawless. In fact, that was the point. The beauty came from the way they fit together. The way Lily's chords created space for Noah's melody. The way Noah leaned ever so slightly into the keys, playing not just notes, but effort, courage, trust. When they reached the final line, Lily let her left hand linger on the last chord just a second longer, giving Noah time to finish his final note. And when it ended, the silence was immediate and electric. Then the audience stood. Not because it was impressive, but because it was true. Michael remained in the wings, blinking hard. He didn't clap right away. He just watched as his son turned to look at Lily, and smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. The kind that said, "I did it." Lily smiled back. They stood, bowed briefly, and left the stage just as quietly as they had entered. Michael met them backstage, placing a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "You were incredible," he said, voice low with emotion. Noah didn't reply, but he leaned into his father slightly, just for a second. Lily looked up. "He led the whole thing," she said with a proud smile. "I just filled in the blanks." Michael shook his head slowly. "No. You made space." And he stepped into it. We grow up believing that music is about mastery. That the beauty of a piece lies in how perfectly it's played, how flawless the rhythm, how precise the technique, how polished the sound. But that belief overlooks something far more powerful, the kind of music that's born when someone dares to sit beside you and play the part you can't reach alone. Noah didn't need to be a virtuoso. He didn't need to use both hands, or hit every note in perfect time. What he needed, what we all need in one way or another, was someone willing to fill in the rest without making him feel like less for not doing it all himself. And Lily? She didn't need to be a teacher, or a therapist, or a prodigy. All she had to do was recognize that Noah's one-handed melody was worth joining, that her part, though quiet, could become something meaningful when paired with his. That's the lesson. You don't have to be able to play the whole song to make music that matters. You don't have to carry the entire weight of the world, or even your own story, to be part of something beautiful. You just need to show up. You need to listen. You need to be willing to sit on the empty side of the bench and play what's missing, not because someone asked, not for applause, but because you saw the space, and chose to fill it. We often think of helping as fixing, of stepping in with solutions, answers, instructions. But real help, the kind that heals, is quieter than that. It doesn't lead. It doesn't correct. It simply accompanies. It says, I see what you can do. Let me join you where you are. In a world obsessed with achievement, Lily reminded us that accompaniment is an act of courage. And Noah reminded us that trust is born not from perfection, but from presence. Theirs wasn't just a duet. It was a declaration. Connection is more important than control. Presence is more powerful than performance. And that truth doesn't only live in music rooms or on softly lit stages. It applies everywhere. In classrooms where a struggling student needs more time, not more pressure. In homes where a quiet child needs someone to sit beside them, not ask why they're quiet. In friendships where showing up, even without the right words, is enough. Too often, we wait to be good enough before we offer ourselves to others. We think we need training, titles, permission. But maybe the real work of healing, of building community, of making meaning, starts with one simple act. Sitting down. Sitting down beside someone and saying, I'll play the part you can't, until you're ready. Sometimes, the most beautiful music comes not from soloists, but from those who dare to play together, broken rhythms and all. Michael understood that now. Watching his son that night on stage, watching the way Lily let Noah lead, watching the way a crowded room rose to its feet not in awe of talent, but in reverence for bravery, he saw the truth of it. We're not meant to do it all alone. And we don't have to. Because somewhere, someone is sitting quietly beside us, waiting for us to begin. And maybe, just maybe, they already know the part we're too afraid to try. There's a quiet kind of power in what Lily did, one that's easy to miss if you're only listening for crescendos. She didn't arrive with sheet music, or instructions, or the need to complete anything. She didn't sit down to correct Noah, or to rescue him from his limitations. She simply sat beside him, matched his pace, played the notes he couldn't reach, and in doing so, gave him something no applause ever could, permission. Permission to try. Permission to make a sound. Permission to believe that his beginning was worth hearing. So often, we focus on finishing, on reaching the end, proving we've made it. But the real miracle, it wasn't that Noah played the last note. It was that he dared to touch the first one. Because sometimes, the most important music isn't the part that resolves the melody. It's the part that says, you're allowed to begin. And that's why her role mattered so deeply. Not because she helped him cross the finish line, but because she didn't help him finish the song. She helped him believe he could start one. If you've ever held back because you thought you only knew part of the story, if you've ever hesitated to reach out, to show up, to play your small piece because it didn't feel like enough, remember this. Someone out there might be waiting for you to sit beside them, to play the part they can't reach, to make the music whole. You don't have to finish the song. Just help someone believe they can start one. Like and subscribe to if you believe in quiet moments that change lives. And tell us in the comments. When was the last time you played alongside someone, so they didn't have to play alone?